All right, welcome everyone at the next multi-networking community sync. Today is June 12th. Today, I think what we talked last week, I think Lionel brought up a topic to pick up our next requirement and start discussing around that one. To give you, before we start that one, if you have other topics to pick up, let me know. Let me paste the link in the chat if you want to add yourself to the list as well. But if you have other topics to discuss, call it out, because I think this one probably can take the rest of the meeting. Quick update from the my side, the repositories. I brought that up with the SIG networking. There was no objections to getting the repositories. So currently I'm just waiting. Anyone knows, is that somehow I should push anyone to get this done? No action since a week at least. Or that just eventually gonna get picked up and handled? Anyone knows? There's no assignee even to the issue.
I think you can. I'm pretty sure you can assign me to it, and I can try to follow up. I think it's just a
Oh,
matter of just assign me to it, and then that'll remind me to kind of push on it. I think you need. I got to remember the rules. I think you need like at least 2 chairs or leads to just say yes, and then I don't know. Just assign me to, or just CC me into it rather, and I'll follow up on it for you. I'll help you.
Shane UTT, that's you?
Yeah, it's me.
The tag in GitHub. Okay, gotcha. Let me maybe share this tab. That would work. Oh, this I think slash assign, right?
Yeah. That or CC, either one's fine. It'll just remind me to kind of pick up on it for you, because I believe I can't remember the rules for this because it's been like a year since we had to create a new repo, but I think we just need like Tim and one other lead, like 2 leads to say yes, and then that's good.
Oh, okay. I can follow up with them as well. Let me maybe add you, because there are 2. So let me maybe add you to the other guy as well quickly. Appreciate for help, Shane.
Yep. I'll vote yes, and then I just need to get like one other person to vote yes. / I'll share it around with
I got
everybody.
Antonio LGTM. Does he count? He's on the
Yeah,
list of
yeah,
owners.
he does. He counts
So
too.
he's on the list of the owners though. But yeah, I created it, so I assume.
Okay.
So there
Yeah,
you
he
go.
counts.
Okay. Let me get back to this. Any other updates? Anyone?
On my side for the NRI, so I tried it. I have a demo if you want. I
All
posted the
right, we
link
were supposed to do that. Yes, Lionel. Yeah, definitely. Let me make you a co-host. Do you want to share something?
Sure.
More. Make co-host. Yes. Okay. All yours. Let me stop sharing, and then it's all yours.
Now I think you can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So yeah, I continued on the same repo as last time when I used CDI. Just I merge now everything using NRI because it looks a bit better. So we'll talk a little bit more about the scheduling part, because I think this part could be interesting for first NRI, but also for status of the resources like IPs and MAC addresses. Maybe it could help us for this kind of things. I'm not sure, but we will discuss at the end, I believe. Something that I didn't notice last time is that when you don't claim a resource, but you still have it in your pod spec. I could give an example. So it is like this: you have your pod, and then you have your resource claim, but you don't claim the resource as part of the container. The scheduling is still called, meaning that you can schedule a pod on a specific node only based on this. So you don't really need to claim the resource, and you also don't need, in that case, you don't need either the DRA driver or the kubelet plugin.
Is
So
it because they didn't fully implemented that? Is that the reason, or is that's by design, that such approach?
I haven't found any documentation for it, so I'm not sure. I still need to ask people around to see what is the reason. But if you look into the example of this new DRA way, they are not also claiming the resources. They just have it in the pod level. I'm not exactly sure of the reason behind, but I did what with what I had, so this was available. So I didn't have to claim the resource, and I could go directly through NRI. So I looked. I'm not an expert in NRI, but from what I could read and what I can try is just some API that allows you to create some plugins to hook into some specific action or at specific point of the pod or container lifecycle. So you can hook into or listen to some events. Like for us, what would be interesting would be run pod sandbox and stop or remove pod sandbox. So we can add or remove the interfaces and call CNI at that time. What maybe it could be interesting in the future if it happens that the API allows to adjust container if you hook into the create container. So you can modify the annotation, the mounts, so you can change the environment variables. So I think we were discussing about that a few weeks ago about for services, I think.
Would that be so? You're saying that update annotation or labels will trigger one of the other ones? Because that's what
No.
today can. I think you can only modify in a pod. You can only modify the labels around the metadata. You cannot change the spec anywhere, right?
Right. I mean, but this is during the create container. The container is just being created, and then you modify it at that time. But right, otherwise, you cannot update on the fly spec, most of the spec in your pod.
Most of them, I would say. Yeah. I can look up what is being updated right now. They do some updates. Right.
Yeah, you can modify the container CPU and memory limit now with this in place pod vertical scaling.
Oh, gotcha.
And otherwise, you need also to enable NRI in your container runtime. I think in container D 2.0, it's enabled by default, but not in the first version. I don't know about CRI-O. And in the default configuration, the requests are timed. So you get timed out if it exceeds 2 seconds, for example. So you need to configure it. So you have only 2 seconds in that case to call the CNI and do everything that you have to do behind.
Is that changeable, or that's
this is, you can configure this in Containerd at least. You have I don't have the configuration here, but it's somewhere in the configuration of.
I see. This is a Containerd configuration.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And I added 2 pull requests. One was to add some more hooks into NRI, and the second was from Antonio to add just an example of network injection.
So where did Antonio? What was Antonio's change? What did that help?
It is just a plugin for network device injection. It's in the example list of plugins that are
okay.
in NRI.
I see.
He doesn't use CNI in that case. He just read the pod and reads the annotation of the pod because he's storing the what has to be injected in the annotation, and then he injected manually like just in Golang.
What about backward reverse feedback? Is there a ways to give anything, or that's not there? It's just only there is no feedback. Is there any feedback you can give back to the kubelet? I assume not, right?
No, there is no. But as I said, maybe we could extend it, because create container, you can do this adjustment on the annotation, mounts, environment variable, etc. So maybe we could have something for like this for pod. So we could, on the run pod sandbox, we could adjust the pod and then change the pod IPs and all
when
the
you
stuff.
say
the run pod, when you run a pod, the result is just the ID. So we have to extend the API to have something to pass back.
Right, that's why I'm but is the create container already doing that, or that's not? Because that's I'm a bit confused, Lionel, and I think Mike probably knows as well. Are you saying that the create container has that API, or?
Yeah, this API I haven't tried it, but I see it in the example. You can already do that.
I can explain what's going on a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay, go ahead.
So we've received the request from Kubelet to do a container create, for example, right? Mm-hmm. So what we do is we then call NRI, okay, at different stages. We call NRI and say, here's the parameters we have so far. Do you want to modify them, right? And it just happens to be named the same as the CRI API here, right? Run pod sandbox and create and those things.
Gotcha. And maybe one question to what you're saying. So you can only modify the in-flight parameters that you are given, is what you're saying?
That's right. You are a participant, if you will, in the CRI plugin step, right, of converting the kubelet requests over CRI and any other user of the CRI API into an OCI spec that will then pass right along to the runC runtime or other type of runtime.
And through all the stages, right? So basically, at the very early, right. you can grab the data, you can modify some of them, so the rest of the stages can reuse them. But then the question: are those then some of them? Are any of them pushed back to the pod to the API? Do you know?
To the caller,
yes.
they can get results in status, but no, for the most part, we don't yet have a reply back telling them that, okay, we did it and we modified it. But that sort of exists already, right? We already have configurations and other ways that we enhance and augment the containers to actually realize that container OCI spec, right? For being run, right? Or for updating it, that sort of thing.
I see.
Extending the amount of memory that's available to the container, for example, is the kind of update you get, right? Okay.
All right.
So really, it's just this is about being a participant. Now, I don't know if you've got another chart talking about the runC hooks, the OCI hooks, if you will. But we also have one of our plugins supports the runC hook pattern, the OCI hook pattern that was done by the Cryo team, right, and by the runC team to support being able to run binary execution code, right, in the same root namespace, if you will, of unless you're rootless in the user namespace in that case that runC is running at during the operation of creating the container in runC as well. Okay, so if you've got a hook modifier schema using the pod containers / podman / their hooks, then those work here too. Okay, so you'll see, and that's how Cryo has been doing hooks for the last few years, and we support that now through NRI as well. And of course, Cryo supports NRI. Podman doesn't support NRI, but Podman does support these OCI hooks.
So the OCI hooks is the thing that we were using before, because in the previous book we were using CDI devices, and then we were hooking into this create container and
sort of. See, we support CDI in another way. We literally have another set of hooks that call out to the CDI, interfaces that were created when we did the COD work. So we enable you to plug in CDI devices without using an NRI plugin. Okay, just based on you've got this config in this directory that's configured in the containerd, TOML. Okay, so we actually support CDI. We're going to enable that also by default once we have they go to beta, I guess, or GA within Kubernetes, the use of CDI. But 2.0 will enable CDI by default. We just haven't enabled it by default in 1.7 or 1.6 yet. I don't think we even put it back in 1.6 yet. There was pushback on adding CDI to a 4-year-old release of Containerd. Does that help?
Yeah, that's very
so
helpful.
CDI we already have support for, right? And you can turn it on in 1.7. NRI is a new next gen, if you will, way to do hooks. We could do a CDI, plugin as well here for injecting CDI, but we don't need to because it's already built in. But again, that's just for CDI hooks. And NRI also supports the hook pattern the schema hook pattern that they use for OCI in Cryo and Podman.
Right.
And I believe Docker supports it too now through the support we already have in CDI. You can name a device and it should work now in Docker. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
One of the problem also, I will just mention it right after, but I can mention it now, is that when run pod sandbox is called, it's with the container runtime interface parameters. So you don't have the pod spec itself. So you don't know.
That's right. You've got an abstracted version. I'm having a conversation with Liget. If you go look on the download API, I agree with the Intel guys. We need to do more work here to get some kind of agreement that at least, even if it's abstracted, we still need all of the information. I'm having a hard time understanding why we don't pass all the pod spec information down. They're worried, I believe, about the issue that, well, once we do that, then we can't change it. Because if we change it, it might break the runtime if they're actually relying on these additional fields, the additional content of the pod spec.
Yeah. So Lionel, how did you get the data?
So yeah, in that, I mean, first I listed all the steps that we need to do to create this NRI plugin and how does it work. So you in sync pod you have these prepare resources that supposed to call the DRA driver or kubelet plugin, but in our case it's not called at all because we don't claim the resources in the container, so we don't really need this kubelet plugin. And your NRI plugins need to register to this NRI SOC for some specific events. So in our case, it will be the run pod sandbox. And then kubelet will call a container runtime that will for run pod sandbox. And then after it executed like most of the steps to create the pod, it will call all the NRI plugins for it. And then this is how I do it now, is that I call the Kubernetes API to get all the claims for this pod. So you can get the claim in this via the status because it's stored in the reserved for of the claim status.
Yeah, we should be able to. This is cool. I'm just saying we should be able to get them to extend the CRI API on the run pod to add the claims.
Yeah, and there's a cap for that. Okay. I don't think it's for the pod level. I think it's for the container level, but maybe we could contribute to this cap. But in this case, I just call the Kubernetes API, and then I call the CNI or anything else, and then I need to report the status, but I don't know how to report the status at that stage because I I can't update
So you literally could now put the claims in as annotations at the run pod sandbox level, if you wanted to. It wouldn't be the annotations that we received from Kubelet, but you could add them as the annotations both on containers and on the pod, right?
But those
yeah,
will not
true.
get back. But those would not get pushed back to the pod, right? Or would they?
They wouldn't get pushed back to the pod, but they would be in the metadata.
Yeah,
for the
that's
pod.
yeah, but that's okay. That's just during creation of the pod. I think we need it through the life cycle of the pod as well.
I agree.
That's
I
more
agree.
important.
Yeah,
So, I think what I'm get claims. So I missed the get claims piece. What does that mean? I might be.
So the container runtime called your NRI plugins for this run pod sandbox, and then at that stage, you know the NRI pod sandbox, which is very similar to container runtime interface pod sandbox. It doesn't contain the pod spec itself. It contains different attributes, and inside you have only this. You don't have the resource claim inside, so you don't know which claims are or which resources are claimed by this pod.
Right.
And you need to find them. And in my case, I find them by using the Kubernetes API, and in the claims you have the status, and you have this reserved for that contains the pod name.
Very
And
cool.
so get claims reaches out to Kubernetes API. Is that correct?
Yeah, it uses the Kubernetes API.
Oh, okay. So you don't just get the. Can you not just get the pod spec then? The whole thing.
Yeah, that network NRI plugin here, right, is at the kubelet level, right?
No, that's fine. But if you reach out, Lionel, if you reach out to the Kubernetes API, you could just get that pod, right?
But you don't want the pod, you want the claims, because the claims contains the information about the CNI spec, if you CNI.
Fair.
And
yeah, fair. I hear you. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, you're right. Okay, because okay, and get claims gives you just the claims for that pod. What you're saying?
Yes. Yeah, get all the claims for that pod.
And then from that you get the reference to all the other kind of the whole chain. Each claim has point to a pod network, or in your case, you just use network attachments directly, I assume.
Yes, but I think in DRA we need to do it in some other way. We need to store the data of this reference to your what's it called resource handle. So you in the status of your claim, you need to put the CNI spec, I think, when you do scheduling. I mean, it's just a detail, but otherwise, yes, you need somehow to get the CNI spec.
What do you mean by CNI spec? The config or?
CNI config, sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Or whatever you're gonna call it, right? This can be
however you're gonna reference.
Yeah, whatever you're gonna execute to. So in your case, Lionel, what you did is, can you maybe carry on through your
I have a demo. It's
Yeah.
the same demo as last time.
Right.
We have pod A first that points to a resource claim that points to a network attachment, which could be pod network or network selection element in Multus. It has an interface name, and it points to the network attachment definition. We have pod B that points to the same claim, but the claim is already claimed by pod A, so it will demo A, so it will never be scheduled. And we have demo C that use a resource claim template that gets converted to resource claim, one for each pod.
Is it is it one per each pod, or is it one per each claim in a pod, per pod? Is it per claim per pod, or just per pod? Because I can have multiple templates right inside the pod.
Right. Yes. So you will get 2 claims in that. I mean, if you have 2, yeah.
Okay, so it's per claim per pod.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a demo. I will just install CNI plugins first, and I will install the demo. So I have the controller that is used that implements this DRA scheduler thing, and I don't have DRA or kubelet plugin in that case, but I have NRI plugin. And
Can you give more detail? What does the DRA controller do?
It is called when you schedule or create a claim, and it is used to fill the status for which node the pod can be scheduled.
Oh, okay. Is that I assume is that now the 130 version, or this is your previous from 129?
This is 130, but I don't really use this feature. I mean, I don't
Okay.
really like. I mean,
You didn't dig into
scheduling
that.
is very hard.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha. No,
And
that's fine.
they will change it. They will change a
Yeah.
lot of things in the next DRA version, from what I could see.
Yeah.
And
I think that's the main contention problem with the upstream, that they want to push back against this controller, which is a black box, and auto scaling is unknown for auto scaling, so that's why this is tricky.
Right. The DRA Classic doesn't have enough details expanded upon about how the device is being allocated and claimed.
Yeah, exactly.
Not yet. We could extend it. I think they haven't killed it yet. They were looking for additional scenarios. If you guys have a scenario for classic DRA, love to hear it.
Well, in our case, for now, we are just trying to configure on the pod level and get the status.
That's fair. Thanks.
And the second part is the NRI plugin. So it's the one that we saw in the picture previously. Here is the one that will get the claim, configure the call the CNI, and yeah, in our case, it doesn't report the status yet, but.
Okay. So it's one that will get each claim. Is it called one? It's called once per pod, right? So basically once per. Is that true?
Yes, on the run pod sandbox.
Right. And then you get all the claims, and from there you could just call. You would call the whatever is in reference per each claim in the pod, right?
Yeah.
So
in that case, it will be
I wonder how, because what I'm calling out, how we would do the multiplexing here. If I'm not mistaken, in Multus, you make one call, Multus gets the pod and see how many interfaces it wants, and from that one CNI call, it just do its bidding, right? For all the interfaces. So one call and multiplexes into n number of creations of stuff. Here, this plugin itself, that guy would call the network catastrophes if I have more than one, right? That's what I'm getting at. It's something that we need to think about how that can be done, and either just calling that kind of out. You see that, right, Lionel? You see what I'm calling out here?
I'm not sure. I mean, for each claim, I don't really see the difference.
Let's assume
for each.
Yeah, so basically now you are going to call Multus, let's say 5 times if I have 5 interfaces, right? Today in Multus, that has a hand, probably you want to add that. Today, what we'll have the 5 interfaces, there will be no 5 calls, there will be 1 call to Multus, and it will handle the 5 interfaces in one call. That's what the difference is. And that maybe you can add.
I would call this a replacement for the CNI hook that Multus use. Dog, what do you think?
That's fair, but this is the kind of multiplication that I'm calling out. Dak?
I mean, I think there's merit to all of the things. So like Mache, what you mentioned, that sounds right to me, right? Like there's something interesting here when you say, hey, from this point, you're going to call Multus 5 times instead of calling it once. And it makes me ask this important question about when's the right time to call it. And so here's a important design element that should be the next generation here is the more information that we can pass whatever multiplexer we have here be it Multis or something else, it doesn't matter. The more information we can pass it so that it doesn't require querying the API, the better. Because that is one of the main design complaints about something like Multis CNI is that it becomes a blocker that has to make API queries before you get a pod creation. And people don't love that design.
So keep in mind, this one is still that, right? It's just you move the
you move the lump in the carpet.
Yeah,
I mean,
into
in
NRI plugin. I think this is where we would have to work with Mike probably to go and what he was saying, like pass me the whole pod. But not only that, keep in mind, I'm not sure how to do that, Doug, though, because
I mean,
to achieve what you're saying, that the very base minimal we can at least the most that we can pass, it's let's say the pod network, the one that we will all standardize on and build this NRI plugin around. So basically what you will get that section, and we maybe can work with the NRI to maybe, in addition to the pod, give me all the claims and give me all. Now I'm wishful thinking, of course. So don't take it by word, but let's say wishful thinking where NRI will pass you the pod, the claims, and the pod networks that we define, right? I think that can get you going, and this is something
that's enough. It's enough to do the job, but I want to make people aware of this idea because it would be great to have like whatever the entire pod or the pod and claims in my fantasy dream world. But I think this is important, and I think it's important to this like future conversation of like what's going on with like a next generation of CNI, because I can imagine like a number of CNI plugins or whatever network type thing you plug in, if it's not CNI, want to have this like richer interaction with Kubernetes API, and can we get it so that we don't block a pod creation on API queries here?
I will give you one better. I was now thinking about like you see how today, and sorry Lionel, give me 5 minutes. When you see the way we have it today, what you could do, this is something that I think Michael, I think from was calling that out. What if we were to just use the CNIs the way they were meant to use, where you can have multiple of them defined? We don't do that today, right? Multus has one CNI config and that's it, right? What if we were to create n number, or even dynamically create CNI config per each pod network that you create? And that will be your own custom configuration kind of implementation, where I have a pod network called MacVTAP. My controller sees that and it understands, oh, MacVTAP, okay, I need to create CNI configs everywhere called MacVTAP. And what's going to happen if we were to have the wishful approach where you get past the MacVTAP into you know that, oh, okay, I have to call the MacVTAP CNI, that's already local and already defined, right? Some ways of indirection, then there is no API call anywhere, right? Because I have all the data. I have the CNI config defined the way I want it through my controller on the nodes, right? Through the CNI config. And it doesn't have to be CNI config, can be completely whatever you wish. But the only config that you rely on is the name of the pod network. That's what I'm getting at, right? That can be your main entry point differentiator. Do I do default or do I do something else, right? And then based on name, I know that I have to have some special handling for it, right? I think, unfortunately, you lose all the per pod capabilities, right? You cannot have those with that model, where this pod has to have this MAC address, or that pod from the same network has to have different configurations. So you miss on that, but then there is a way to achieve zero API call kind of approach, right? It's more constraining, but yeah, faster, definitely scalable. Just a thought, and that might be just one of the implementation that we can pursue. This is something that I was thinking, if you were to do like end-to-end testing, some sort of CI for this, I think that could be the basic kind of approach that we can take, right? Instead of just doing referencing with pod network to anything, let's just go based off of the name, right? So depending on what name you have, that type of network I'm gonna use, because that's somehow standardized in that open source kind of or CI ways of having this, right? And I'm going by just the name. That's the only configuration I get. Just a thought. All right, sorry, Lionel, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I was on the demo and I was explaining what was the responsibility of the different components, and now I will apply the demo A, which is there. So I have a pod that refers to the resource claim. So it's the same demo as before, just I remove like 2 or 3 lines that was the container that was claiming. So we have the resource claim that points to a network attachment that contains the interface name. And then we have the network attachment that refers to the network attachment definition that contains the CNI config. So I apply this. We have the pod that is being created. It will have another interface, which is net1, and that has an IP. It is the interface that I configured via the claim. We have the resource claim also here, which is MacVLAN ETH0 attachment. And if we look into this, we have the reserved for, meaning that this demo A has claimed this resource. So it is put into the status here. It is done by Kubernetes itself. So this is the way I retrieve the claims in my case. And as part of the scheduling process, I am specifying in which node this this resource can be claimed.
Is available here.
Yeah. What do I also say that it cannot be shared? So this resource cannot be shared, and I get everything that I need from the parameter ref into this resource handle. So I don't need to have multiple like.
Oh, okay. You just pull it. Oh, that's convenient. All right.
Exactly.
So basically,
I think
you don't
this,
have to.
Yeah, you just do it during the scheduling time, and then when you are in the configuration time in the NRI plugin, you just get the information from here.
And that's done by the NRA controller that you created.
The DRA controller, yes.
The one that you created, the one that's yours, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, this is the one that I created. It's the DRA controller, and that's the one that filled this information here.
Oh, okay, perfect.
The status of the.
Yeah, that's even easier. Yeah, that's even, you don't have to. Okay, I was thinking that might be a problem where, yeah, if I reference another object, right, then how do I get that object? But I think you can, your controller, and we can have that in our implementation. We can be a bit unsafe on this one. Keep in mind, getting some CRD blindly, it's kind of risky, but I think in our core probably that won't fly. But in our case, I think this is something that we can do, right? We can just put all the stuff that we care, just whatever you reference, I will just get that as a JSON, create a JSON out of it, put it as a string, and do this. Yeah, that's great.
So I from what I understood, they have added this in DRA because you don't want your parent ref to be deleted in case. In case it got deleted, you still want to unconfigure this claim for your pod.
Okay.
Because you cannot delete this resource claim if a pod is claiming this resource.
Gotcha. And that's done through, is that built into core, or that's just finalizer? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Can you scroll up? I think that's gonna be, go to the metadata. Does it show metadata?
Finalizer.
Yeah,
There's a
there you go.
DRA networking. There you go.
Simple. Okay.
For the second demo is a pod demo B that will never be scheduled because the demo A is already scheduling this resource, and the resource I marked it as non-shareable. So if I describe this pod here, it says that the resource claim is in use, no new claim to deallocate. And the demo C is here. It's deployment with two pods that claim resource claim template in that case, and it points to the same demo, the same configuration as the previous demo A. And for each pod, the resource claim will be created. So apply it. Two pods will be created. We can check the IPs of this pod or the interfaces of this pod here. So we have this net1 interface that is being created, same for the second one. And if we check the resource claim, we have one resource claim per pod.
That's awesome.
And
So
yeah, it's done by Kubernetes.
and this is, and I assume you still, I see the IPs there assigned, but it's because you have the CNI still, default CNI still running, right? That
which one do you mean? This one?
Yeah. And then
Yeah,
in the
I mean,
status,
I haven't touched to the default network.
gotcha.
It's what it's related. The reason why is related to what we discussed before is that you cannot return from the NRI plugins, or you cannot modify the pod status. I think Antonio answered this for clarification on Slack.
So I'm missing. So you are forbidden, or if I have enough power, I cannot even do that.
No, you.
I wonder. Okay.
I don't think you can. I mean, after the pod is created, for example, you cannot update this field for sure.
No, that's
sure.
it's non-changeable. I agree. I wonder whether if it's empty, whether it's the same case I would put Cider in Node, where it's only one way. You can from nothing to something, right? I wonder whether that's the same case here.
But yeah, what I would like to do is to modify this container runtime pod sandbox, and then it goes back to kubelet with the IPs that I put via the NRI plugin. But,
that would be the best. But I think that's. I think we won't be able to get that initially. This is something that your example, your network NRI plugin would have to do. Where, okay, I see default, I will just push that. Or I see one interface, I will just use the first one on the list. Or unless we support some sort of default indicator, then I use that IP and push that one as the main status. I wonder whether that's possible. I think that's something that you could try, right? You get the pod. One thing to go around permissions, try to pass the kubelets kubeconfig. That's one nifty trick you can try out, Lionel, too. For your NRI plugins, you have a service account for them. So instead of using the service account, just pass the kubeconfig of your kubelet, local nodes kubelet. And that's, you can just mount that through volume and just ensure you can pass a -- kubeconfig to your binary. And that way you have the full account as the kubelet and the same permissions as kubelet. And then you can try updating the status. You see what I
Right. Yeah, I see. Seems a bit a hacker, I would say, but yeah, I could try.
It's hacky, but this is how you go around. If you were to add to your service account ability to update status, and this is a by the way, this is a security thing. At least we do that in GKE, where adding power to modify status to a service account is a no-no. But if you use kubelets kubeconfig, that's fine. And then the reason for that is because then you limit kubelets kubeconfig is special because it has power only to elements of its own node. And that's a special handling in core API, which should be probably generalized because you cannot achieve the same thing by just creating a service account, which is limited to only this node. You cannot do that. Kubelet can. So that's the special thing about kubelet, where its power is only limited to its own node. So it's the kind of the security exposure is limited to a node. A neat trick. That's why you think it's hacky, but if you think about it, that's at least your exposure is limited to the node, not cluster wide. So that's why it's a maybe hacky, but it's safe hack, kind of.
Okay. Okay.
So you can look at that, and then you can try to disable your default CNI and see whether you can update the status from there and see whether, I wonder whether that's that could work, right? That can be like next step for this, if you have time to try it out.
Okay. Yeah, I could take a look. Yeah, sure. I didn't know about this feature. So that was all for the demo, and for improvements or conclusion or anything. I don't know how to call this section, but we have now this pod level. I'm not sure if it's official, as we mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's what I was wanted to ask you. I wonder whether that pod level thingy, is that like an official? We probably need to ask maybe Patrick about this one. Is that like how this official is going to be handled, or is that just a side effect of some of the things? And I wonder.
I mean, in the new DRA way that they are demoing, they have the same thing. They don't claim the resource in the container level. They just have it
Okay.
in the pod level, but they never specify anything else that this kubelet plugins that is acting on the or returning the CDI device that acts on the container.
But
yeah, there's this. Yeah.
Maybe one proof for that. I assume when you pass a template to the same field, they do create the claims per each template, per each pod, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I assume that's an indicator, exactly. So that's an indicator that they, I think, are currently do support that properly. Okay.
But they never, or I never seen any way to provide configuration of these resources on the pod level. It was, from what I could see in the example and the demo, it was only via CDI, so for the container level.
Okay.
There is this CAP has said that proposed to pass some resource information via CRI. This could be interesting for us. The status, I had an idea with the status is that you no longer use IPAM, CNI IPAM. Instead, you have an IPAM that is done during the DRA controller. Because during the DRA controller, you can modify this field here in the claim status. So and
No, that's
this
fair.
Resource handle, you can add a list. It's a list, so you can have a data that contains, I don't know, the MAC address if you generated the IP addresses, and
so this is where the power. That's a fair point, Lionel. You have the full power to everything then. If that, so the question is whether that controller and that model stays in 31. I think that's the big question here, because this is where that controller is contentious. I think how they're gonna do it is you have to preemptively kind of declare how much resources the controller will say each node has. I think that's the goal here, so that the auto scaling could work. I think that's one change, but yeah, that's a fair point, Lionel. We can push things into the controller, but here we need to be generic as much as possible, right? So either we create a template for that controller in as on our example, and then everyone just picks that up as a library and builds on top of it, right? Let's say Multus will have their own version of that controller, which they will say, okay, instead of deploying that, deploy ours, which has the special logic, what you're calling out, right? Because then the controller has to be aware of the NAT spec, right?
Yeah. The problem with that is that you need first to implement IPAMs for this DRA controller, and or your IPAM that is existing in CNI, you are no longer using them, or you can use them, but you will never get the IPs reported. Like, I guess DHCP would not work in that case because we cannot update the IPs in the status of the claim.
No, well, So why not? Your controller. Oh, okay, because the agent should query the DHCP. I see the agent rather than the, because now controller is one, is centralized, and this is you need to do DHCP per. So this will work beautifully with whereabouts. I see, because whereabouts just is global. We call it per node, but I think it could be called globally, and that will be. You see that, Doug? That whereabouts would fit here like a glove. This is something that would
Interesting observation.
yeah, whereabouts with its global stuff. It doesn't have to be called in every agent. It's called here because this guy is called every claim, and beforehand it just run whereabouts kind of as a Go library. Run whereabouts. It will create the IP how it's called, IP address, IP pool address or something. It will create that object for you, will claim stuff, and then it will push it to this field, and then you're done. You don't have to even redistribute whereabouts.
And if you want to do that for every parameter, you need also some kind of IPAM for MAC addresses. And I don't know.
Oh, no. As I said, that controller will be Multus specific, and sky's the limit. And instead of you pushing all the parameters into network attachment as a JSON, it's all standardized in some ways, right? The network attachment can be more. You can define the spec, right?
Right. What I mean is that this DRA controller is the one that creates the MAC address. You don't get the MAC address when the interface is being created.
But, and that's fine. You want to you want to override that, and then you want to have it in a centralized way, right? Anyway, so I think that's still fine, right?
I'm not exactly sure for every CNI if everything's would fit.
Oh no, we're talking in context of Multus here. I think why I'm exploring this is just to kind of show off the power of what you just kind of showed, right? I think this is where how far we can go, and then how much of because you have centralized. What's good about the centralized NRI controller, the array controller, is that it's just one. Keep in mind, before it was all done per each call of the pod, right? It's still going to be, but it's in one place, right? And it's all centralized. So that's the advantage of the scale. Maybe getting a bit of a hit, but that I think that's not. I don't think that's a big deal. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. So that was for the status part, and we still cannot update the configuration or the status.
So I think the status will have to be done by the agents themselves, right? Because this is where that part definitely has to be done by that, right?
The DRA controller, I mean.
Can it do that? You think that I was thinking about the DRA agent, but you think that the controller can do that? Maybe you're right, because then.
I mean, in this case, DRA agent. Do you mean the NRL plugin or?
Yeah, that's what I mean by agent. Because you need to know
what I mean is that from here you cannot update the status of the claim. It is done during the scheduling part in the DRA controller.
I see what you're saying. Gotcha.
For the default pod network, I could have done the same as before, disable the default CNI, or have this dummy CNI that someone proposed, I think, on Slack. But I haven't touched to this. Same dynamic hot pluggable attachment I haven't touched. But lifecycle could be good because we have this remove pod sandbox hook that is possible. And yeah, that was everything for the demo.
Mike?
Yeah, to me, where we're going to have problems right on this is where we set the IPs for the pod, right? On the run pod sandbox API. When do they get allocated? Are we doing it the old way or the new way if we have a controller here? Within the limit of time, right? Within the time limit. And I think there's an issue there we have with respect to the time that we need to probably address. We had this problem in containers way back when we wanted to do additional hooking and providing of capabilities when the container is run. And we solved that by doing I've talked to Michael about this one as well, Zappa. We solved that by doing a split before running a container to create and start. It requires an additional state for the containers. But if we did that in pods, then you would actually have the ability to create a pod, create your networks, right? Wait for that to happen, get a reply back from the DRA controllers. And then once all the resources are available, then you can start that pod, right? But we wouldn't allow to create a container in a pod until all of the, these network devices, for example, in this particular case, were already created and we had already had a list of the IPs. Then there wouldn't be an update problem after the pod is already started with respect to the number of IPs that are made available, right, and reported. Thoughts? I think it solves a big problem here if we split run pod into create and start.
Yeah. Patches.
Otherwise, how do we do updates later on when we add more networks and we've already reported the status on the pod of here's the IPs, right?
Yeah. So right now that's still done through annotations anyway. I think that's where we need to kind of look at what that can be modified and done. But I think this is where
Annotations are the future.
no, get away. Go away.
Annotations
A
forever.
hack. It's a hack. Name value pairs are just it's a scratch pad hack.
Yeah, so I think what would have to happen is we eventually, as we pick up steam on this whole thing, what I think the cornerstone, what Lionel did can be the cornerstone for this. As we pick this up and get better maturity, this is where we definitely would want to go to the core and give us a networks spec field in the pod, right, in the status, which is mutable, right? And then we
can do that. That would be quick. If you want to be able to update the pod's IPs or any other field, in status, we can do that. We just have to make sure Kubelet is ready, ready to, hey, you added another IP. What, that's great. I'll tell the DRA controllers that, something to that effect.
Yeah, so it has to be better figured out. That's a fair point, Mike. You said right now, right? Either because what I was thinking, do we care about then the other fields, right? And maybe we can, if you have multi-networking, you don't care about the other two fields, the pod IP and pod IPs, plural. Those two have their own, and basically those are, let's say, legacy. Whatever you want to do with them, do with them. But then you will have the networks field now, and that will populate your IPs. And whatever you build your systems off of, you should use that section, not the other two, one of the other two. So that's can maybe hand waving here, but maybe that can help us. If we were to build our own endpoint slice controller, that would be ideal because then we just read on the new field rather than old, and then we are all set, right? And basically we can fit into the new ways and the old ways through our controller. But yeah, Lionel, this was awesome. I learned so much. I'm not sure how about other folks, but yeah, congrats. This is really amazing work. Appreciate that. I hope we get that repository. So I think we can, unless if you want to, if you agree on that, we can move that, and that can be, as I said, the base for us to move on how to kind of get that going, right? Starting with the API, that's easy, but from the controller side, I think that your control that you have can be the kind of base for this. Yeah. I think we ran out of time. We can next week discuss about some stuff and future stuff as we mentioned last week. But this was an amazing meeting. I appreciate Lionel. We have this. Luckily, we got this recorded. So yeah, I'm gonna spread this one to everyone to kind of look at it. All right, folks. See you next week.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Annotation.